Hello all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harrison. Each week, I'm joined by hairy, huggable, hunky, homorific stuff people to review movies and talk film news. As usual, this week, I'm joined by Jim Pliafko.
Hi, guys, and hello, listeners. Welcome to the podcast.
And, of course, Will Lindis.
Hey, guys. Good to be back. I think it's going to be a fun show tonight.
Indeed, indeed. So it is heaven and hell this week on the Movie Bears podcast. Those of you who are watching live might notice my awesome halo and Jim's devilish devil horns that don't seem to be aligned with your head, Jim. That's a little weird.
Really?
There we go. There we go. Now you're properly horned.
I'm all horned up for the show tonight.
Okay, yeah.
Oh.
I'll decide by the end of the show if I get a halo or a horn. We'll see how things turn out.
Indeed. We'll see what you pick out in the fourth quarter. But, so Heaven and Hell. This week we are discussing two movies that you may have picked up on from our little theme here. We'll be discussing Sin City, A Dame to Kill For, and Calvary, a movie that's getting a lot of buzz in critic circles, but you may have never actually heard about, and that's a damn shame. But we will talk about that. It is another double feature on this week's Movie Bears podcast. We have a lot to talk about. So are you guys ready to just dive into it?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, here we go. Let's see. This is our 92nd episode. So, yeah, here we go. Kicking it off with Sin City, A Dame to Kill For. All right. So, as usual, we will avoid spoilers until we give you the official spoiler warning, and we get into the deeper spoilery parts of our review. But to kick things off, we will talk about this movie in the scope of giving you our advice in terms of whether it's worth your time and money to check out. We may give you some general thoughts, but they should be spoiler-free. Will, why don't you kick us off? What did you think of the new Sin City sequel?
So this one's really interesting to me. This movie came so far after the first film. I think it was about a decade, right? It was 2000.
9 years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I don't know that there was as much buzz for a sequel for this one as some of the other films that usually get remade. That said, I think that there were a lot of people that came out of the first film having enjoyed the experience, whether or not the plot or the emotional touch points and stuff were necessarily there for you. The first film brought a lot of interesting technical things to the screen that made it a visual smorgasbord. So that's setting the frame for what we've got here. A movie that maybe wasn't like the most anticipated sequel of all time, but comes on the heels of a highly recognized, stylized film. For me, I don't know that I would recommend this one. It's not that it's a bad film. I think that it's just it kind of wears out its welcome a bit. Best way I could really think about this film is you go to a party, right, and you're talking to some people. Some guy comes up to you and he starts telling you a joke. Maybe it's not the best joke you've ever heard. It's not the funniest thing you've ever heard, but it's new, it's different, something new to add to your evening. You get a few laughs. Okay, whatever, fine. The second film is like half an hour later. The same guy walks up to you, and this time he's just drunk off his ass and tries to tell you exact same joke. Only this time it's jumbled and slurred a little bit, and it just doesn't pack the same punch that it did the first time. That's this new Sin City movie. The narrative structure is jumbled, deliberately so. I mean, it's not that they fucked up the narrative structure. It's that they did something unique that we'll talk about in spoilers. I don't think it works. I think a lot of the characters blend together a lot more in this one than the others. I think a lot of the narrative, just like the first one, it's got several little stories that are overlapping. They blur too much. They're not as engaging. I didn't care as much about what the characters were doing. A lot of the male anti-heroes felt the same as one another. A lot of the femme fatales felt the same as one another. It's just like I didn't feel like this movie really brought anything new to the table. It was just another interestingly styled movie that didn't really do much else. That said, we'll talk about her a little bit more in spoilers, but I was blown away by Eva Green. She had a role in the film, quite a decent little role, and I thought that whenever she was on screen, I was really interested in what was going on with her, at least within the confines of the role itself. And it's interesting because this is the second time this year she's done that for me in a movie. She was also in 300: Rise of an Empire. And for me, she was the person who kind of salvaged, like, what was kind of an otherwise maybe forgettable, interesting stylized, but it wasn't the best movie ever. But she was stellar in it, and I thought she was stellar in this as well. So I'm interested in seeing kind of what Eva Green does from here. If this is just like a really, really good year for her, or if maybe this is a catapult onto her being more and more of a name. So, do I recommend you go out and see this movie? No. Am I saying, like, don't go towards the theaters at all, run away screaming? No, it's not a bad flick. It just wasn't a good flick.
Admit it, Will. You just like seeing Eva Green's boobies.
You got me, Brad.
We'll have to talk about that more in spoilers.
Oh, and just in case, I do have it here for visual display. This is the actual graphic novel for A Dame to Kill For.
Have you read it, Will? Have you gone through it?
Yeah, I've got about 6 of those Frank Miller trades. Each one of them tells one of the stories that you see in either the first film or this one. So this massive trade right here, I mean, we're talking hundreds of pages, like 200-something pages, is just the core story of this movie.
The Eva Green story?
Just the Eva Green story, yeah.
Okay. Interesting. All right.
Yeah.
Jim, what about you?
Yeah, I didn't like this movie very much. I mean, I remember the first movie. It was 9 years ago. I remember going to see it, and I was, fairly impressed. It was definitely something new, visually and stylistically, that really hadn't been done much before. And I think that's why it made a big impact. And we can talk later about why this one maybe didn't make an impact, when I really think the two movies are very, very much the same. The stories, of course, are different. They bring in some new characters, but the type of story and the visual stylings, all that stuff seems very, the whole noir tone of the movie, and the noir, I'll call it faux noir stuff that they try to put into this movie is the same thing they did in the first movie. It didn't work for me at all in this movie. You talked about Eva Green, and she's good. I liked her in the 300 Rise of an Empire. She played a similar, I guess, kind of role here, where she's kind of the woman in charge. She's a femme fatale in this movie, and she's I don't know. I guess I don't want to go into that very much about her character here and spoil it. I will say that this movie was visually dazzling. I saw it in 3D. Will, did you see it in 3D?
No, I didn't. I just sprang for the 2D on this one.
We'll pick the horns. We figured it out.
I went with the horns on this one. I was like, since I came down negative on this one, it's like, we'll go horns. We'll see if the horns stay up through the rest of the show, though.
This one actually looked really great in 3D. We saw it in 3D. It looked and sounded great for about 15 or 20 minutes or so. It was really dazzling and kind of like, wow, this thing looks pretty awesome. It's amazing what they're doing on the screen here. And and then as the movie went along, the effect of that kind of wore off on me, and I'm getting to, okay, where's the movie? Where's the story here? I just thought the story was really, I thought it was just lazily written. There were a lot of characters in and out of the stories. As Will said, there's several story vignettes that kind of are loosely interconnected, I guess, in this movie. At least 3 that I can think of, and maybe there's more. This thing had an amazing cast, right? You mentioned Eva Green, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Powers Booth, Josh Brolin, Bruce Willis, Mickey Rourke, Jessica Alba. The Allstate guy was in this one.
Allstate.
Yeah.
Christopher Lloyd, Ray Liotta. I mean, the list goes on for miles. I mean, you put this cast together, and you're like, wow, this thing's going to be awesome. But I'll tell you what, I don't know. I can't blame it on the acting. I have to put it on the writing. I just don't think the story translates well to the screen. I didn't really care much about any of the characters, with the exception, I think, of the Joseph Gordon-Levitt character. He's the one that I kind of liked that story the best. Although we'll talk about the ending to that story because I think it was rather abrupt and weird for me. So, I mean, other than the Joseph Gordon-Levitt storyline, this movie was ultra violent, a lot of violence. I mean, there's a lot of action in this movie, but it's one of those times where I can watch a quiet, tense drama like we'll talk about in the second half of this podcast, and be riveted to the screen, and you can put action scene in front of action scene in front of me, and I'll be bored out of my mind unless the story's good. And that's what happened in this movie. We saw a lot of, well, I won't get into that until spoilers, but I'll just say I don't think it's a shame that I can't recommend people go see this movie in theaters, because I think visually is what this movie's strength is. So but the other aspects of it I think are so weak that I just can't recommend it.
Well, let's see. For me, I have to say this movie is way too violent for a saint like me. Anyway, just kidding. So here's the thing with this movie. So when I went to see the original Sin City, I will be honest with y'all, I'd never even heard of Sin City. I was like, what the hell is Sin City? And I'm told I'm not alone in that. A lot of people had never heard of it before. And while it wasn't the best movie in the universe, I just remember being totally like blown away by the visuals and what it tried to accomplish. And so I guess coming into this movie, my thoughts are this is a universe that aside from the first movie I know nothing about. So cannot wait to see what we get. And it's unfortunate because I felt like it was just a big sort of like retread of the first film. And I know we've already mentioned that, so it's the curse of going last. But it was a little disappointing for me because I guess I was hoping to see more of the Sin City world, maybe expand on some things a little bit. But it just felt like we sort of got the same, not the same characters, although in some instances we do have a couple guys reprising their role, but just seemed like the same sort of cavalcade of stuff. I haven't read any of the comics, Will, so I don't know how prominently the repeat characters feature. Are they like main characters throughout these stories?
Kind of, yeah. There are a few characters that you see. The Marv character and the Dwight character each have 2 stories each in the comics, and you see them with kind of something similar here across both of the films. A lot of the characters, there's a lot of places like the bar or Nancy's place or things like that kind of feature heavily. So in that way, it felt very true to the comics. It felt like it didn't go too far one way or the other. Yeah.
I gotcha. Okay. Well, I felt like this movie should have been retitled Sin City, Ava Green's Boobsicles. And for me, like, she's cool. I like Ava Green a lot. I loved her as Vesper in, Casino Royale. One of my favorite Bond girl/villains ever. But honestly, I laughed at a lot of her stuff in this movie. Like, it's supposed to be very serious and, oh, look, she's seductive and conniving and, whatever. But I'm just like, and that's probably not the reaction they were hoping for. And maybe that's juvenile, but it was just really hard for me to take her seriously in this role, which for me, with an actress that I like, is unfortunate. I'm anxious to get into spoilers, so I won't be long-winded here. But, in the scope of should you go see it, should you not? If you liked the first film, I think it's worth checking out. I don't know that you're going to be blown away again. I think the 3D definitely gave us a nice addition to the pretty awesome visuals. They did some really cool stuff this time around. But altogether, I mean, if it were me giving advice to myself, I'd say probably wait and just rent it rather than spending, $27 to go see it in 3D, XD, IMAX with popcorn and what have you. But that's me. What do you guys think? Spoiler time?
Yeah,
Sure.
I think we're about that point.
Yeah, let's get into spoilers.
Awesome. I gotta say before we hit spoilers, my Halo, I totally want to grab it and throw it like Xena's chakram. Like every time I see it, I just want.
You need.
I want you to do that too, Brad. I want you to find a way to pull that off.
Totally just yeah. Would be awesome. Anyway, spoiler town. Here we go. Sin City, A Dame to Kill For. Spoilers are officially incoming. No one is hanging out with us right now on Google Hangouts, so I'm guessing there's not a lot of interest in this film. Maybe, who knows? Well, Peanut Gallery.
Box office numbers would support that.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone just logged in. My words went into the universe, and a listener appeared. Anyway, for the one person that's watching live, or those of you who are listening,
they knew we were almost done with the movie.
Or for those of you who are listening on iTunes or Stitcher, you may just want to skip forward 10, 20 minutes or so and come back when we start talking about Cavalry. But here we go. Spoilers, fair game. Take it away, guys.
Yeah, so I think the big problem here, I spent a lot of time trying to think, why did I like the first one so much? Because I did, and dislike this one so much when they're the same damn movie. There's some big missing element, and to me, I think that this film tried to play too many narrative gymnastics and did not do them well. The first film, if you think back to it, you had 3 stories and then one little framing story that was on either side of those, but each of those stories was pretty well self-contained. You did Marv's story, then you did Dwight's story. You went through each of the stories one after the other. And so you got a chance to feel like when Marv was going after Goldie's killer, you got to see okay, this is why this gentle giant or this violent gentle giant is doing what he's doing. In this film, everything was a lot more jumbled. They were trying to play a little bit more fast and loose with the timelines. A lot of the stuff in this story happened before the first film. Some of it happened during, some of it happened after, and that was cool that they tried that out. But you ended up not really attaching yourself to any of the characters' plights. I think about Marv's story, and I don't remember thinking of what was he really doing? What was the big emotional push for what he was doing? There wasn't much of one. I think about Dwight's story, and his was just shit was happening to him based on this woman that he used to love, as opposed to this in the first film. His story was all about trying to prevent Old Town from being overrun and by the pimps and the thugs. So all the stories felt a little bit more just kind of whatever all over the place. I think the only exception to that was the new one that was created for this film. All of these come from the different trades except for the last story, which is the continuation of Nancy's story, her revenge thing, which was created just for this film by Frank Miller.
So wait a second. So that continuation is not in the original.
It was. I believe they've now created a comic for it, but it was in conjunction with coming up with this film. It was crafted for this, and that's a shame because I thought that of the different stories in this film, it was the one that maybe could have had the most gravitas, could have had the most emotional pull, but the problem was it all had to sit on Jessica Alba's shoulders, and she was not able to support that weight because, well, Jessica Alba. So there weren't a lot of emotional hooks for me. There weren't, and not to say that the first one had a whole bunch of them, but there were some. You could at least understand why the characters were doing what they were doing. Here, they're just being ultraviolent for the sake of being ultraviolent.
Yeah, and that story was the one at the end, right? And I wasn't even exactly sure why she was going after was it the senator?
Yeah.
Senator Rourke.
Senator
Rourke, played by Powers Booth.
Yeah.
Right? For some reason, she's going after him and trying to take him out. And it wasn't really clear to me. I mean, all of a sudden, she's up and formulating this plan to go get the guy, and I think Marv was involved too. I'm not sure in that. But I don't know. The stories were just so lazily written. I go back to the Joseph Gordon-Levitt story, and it had some kind of emotional base, right? Here's this kid. He's trying to prove himself to, I guess we learned that Powers Booth is his dad, and he's trying to prove himself by, trying to beat him at cards and prove himself worthy. And then we get that ending that's just so abrupt and like, okay, I mean, we just invested all this time getting behind this character, and then boom, he's gone because you need to keep the Powers Booth character around and evil for the next wrinkle in the story that you want to bring along. And I don't know, it just seemed like a half-baked story, and unfortunately, if they had a decent one, I think we could have had a good movie here. Whether it would have done as good as the first one, I mean, this movie actually bombed this weekend at the box office. If you guys have read any numbers, it did like somewhere between 6 and 7 million for the whole weekend or something like that, which is incredibly low. And I'm not sure why that is. Whether it's been too long since the first movie and nobody really cared about the sequel. I mean, all momentum and interest was lost, or what the deal was.
I think it has it distinctly has to do with the unfair proportion of boob to male ass in this movie.
That was an unfair proportion. I felt like it was very lopsided. Not the boobs themselves, but the proportion.
And here's the thing, like Chris Maloney, who we've seen everything in Oz, and I know that man's body inside and out. We didn't even get to see his butt. We get to see Ray Liotta's butt, and that's nice. But I'm just kind of like, wait, so we get to see Ava Green totally naked. You get to see kind of her bush and the strategic shadows, but like, really, we don't even get to see like more than a flash of man butt. I just thought that was sort of a travesty.
Come on, Sin City, more dong. If you make a third one, all dong in 3.
Maybe. But I think I'm trying to figure out why that was and why that imbalance was. And maybe it's because they're trying to evoke that film noir tone and feeling. And if you go back to film noir, the women were not, put this way, the women weren't portrayed as more than love interests or sexual objects in some of those movies, and it's a guy thing, and I think that might be part of it. I don't know if what the director's stance is on male nudity and all that stuff, and you hate to think that there's some kind of double, that he's just perpetuating the double standard for reasons, for personal reasons, but I don't know. I mean, a lot of movies do it. But we just don't see many movies these days that give us a balance of male parts and female parts.
Well, with this one, you have two kind of people at the helm, and you kind of have to isolate them a little bit. You've got Robert Rodriguez, and you've got Frank Miller. Robert Rodriguez does the heavy lifting in terms of the direction. Frank Miller being the guy who did the comics. Like, this is a guy with a long and storied history with comic books, and his style is very much noir. For all the good, all the bad. He wrote a very famous Batman story, which is probably going to be the, at least from all looks of things, is going to be the basis for the Batman versus Superman Dawn of Justice story. He writes with a very, like, his males are very macho, and his women, sex is either their vulnerability or their weapon. This is what you get in his comics. So I wouldn't necessarily say that we'd have to look too much at what Robert Rodriguez brings to the table in terms of, like,
Hello?
Well, are you still with us?
Did I cut out? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut out.
Oh, you totally froze, and you had this expression on your face.
That's the best expression on my face, posing in abject horror.
So,
boy.
a lot of violence in this movie. I mean, this was really, really violent. Like, I don't know how many throat slashings and beheadings we had in this movie, but it was insane. Um, and I don't know. I guess I get a little tired of the violence just for violence sake. And maybe that's a comic book thing. You know, maybe that's Will. You've read the graphic novels, and are they as violent as the movie tried to portray?
They are. I mean, the comics are very violent. There's lots of people dying, very violent deaths. But I think it all comes down to, for me at least, it's less a matter of like how violent the films are, or and more like the reasons for the violence within the little sub stories. You know, again, and I hate to keep going back to the first one, but you can't not compare the two. In the first one, Marv was like killing people left and right, but he felt like he had to because he had this quest to go on because of this woman who showed him kindness. In this one, you've got, again, people just killing people for, like, Evergreen showed me her boobs. Let's shoot my partner in the head. You know, Evergreen showed me her boobs once. I'm going to kill a bunch of people. It all comes back to Evergreen's boobs, doesn't it?
It does.
It wasn't just her boobs. She was like totally naked.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, she stripped down. But yeah, I mean, that just the violence didn't have like a core. Like, I mean, if the same number of people died, the same violent deaths, but I felt like the characters were doing it for a storied reason, I would have had no problem with it. But this was a movie that was 100% style and like maybe 2% substance.
Yep. Interesting that you say that, because we have a live comment from Steve of Sacramento Movie Bears, who just got back from the Sacramento Movie Bears showing of Sin City. Well, they didn't show the movie, they went to a showing. Anyway, he says, I'm often a sucker for a bad film with cool visuals, but with all the tools and talent at Rodriguez's disposal, it was a wasted opportunity. It's both too violent and too boring. In the battle of style versus substance, the style just wasn't enough.
And if it needs some substance to back up this style.
And like I said, the story was just too lazy and, lazy. I mean, in terms of, it had a plot, but the plot just was not very compelling. There was no life to the story. I didn't care about anything that was going to happen to any of the characters in the movie, with the slight exception for Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And then they did the same thing with that. They didn't give it a decent resolution in that story. So, I don't know what more I can say.
One thing I did think was cool, I know we're bashing it a lot, but I loved not one but two Princess Bride references in the movie. I don't know if you caught them, Will. One of them, they straight up use the words "the Princess Bride" in reference to Ava Green's character, I think. And then when Joseph Gordon-Levitt is like at the big table after he's been broken and his hand's all busted, and Rourke is like, bet you wish you had your game hand now. He's like, I know something you don't know. I'm not right-handed. I'm ambidextrous. You know.
Yeah.
That was totally Princess Bride, right? I mean,
I could see that. Yeah.
I thought those card scenes were really well done, actually.
Yeah.
You know, the movie actually slowed down and tried to present a story and create some drama instead of just going from action beat to action beat through the story. Interesting seeing the Allstate guy in there playing a robot. Was he a robot? What the heck was he?
He was a guy. He was just a straight up dude, but he was one of the I am a villain, so I have superpowers type guy. They don't actually have superpowers. The interesting thing about this character, his name is Manute. He was actually played by Michael Clark Duncan in the first film.
Okay.
Who, unfortunately, has passed.
I forgot about that.
It was jarring seeing Dennis Haysbert in this. One, because he's not Michael Clark Duncan, and two, because you're right. You know, he is the Allstate guy. So whenever he was being very menacing, whenever he was like, "Oh, I'm about to beat the shit out of some guy," it felt very, very weird to me. Like I could not get the Allstate commercials out of my head. That's my fault. That's something that's not Dennis Habert's fault. That's totally Will Indus's fault. But at the same time,
I think I turned to Brad at least twice during the movie and told him that you're in good hands with Allstate.
Yeah, it's like when he came in, like, oh man, that guy's gonna kick my ass. It's like, no, he's not. He's gonna offer me a good deal on my car insurance.
All right. Well, guys, we do have another film to get to tonight. Do you feel like we've put a nail in the coffin of Sin City here? Are we good?
Yeah.
I did like seeing. I noticed that Steven Tyler of Aerosmith did the end credit song. Did you guys notice that?
Oh, what was it? I Don't Want to Miss a Dame?
It was called Skin City. No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
It was Skin.
Yeah.
It was.
This film had so many like wasted actors in it. Like,
oh, I know. It's
Rosario Dawson is back. She was in the first one, so they put her in this one, but the role was weak. I mean, the stuff with I guess Ray Liotta was fine for for his little role. The stuff with Christopher Lloyd felt weird. I don't know. There was just a lot of characters that just like, oh, so-and-so's bouncing across my screen. They're going to do something interesting. Nope, now they're off the screen. I'm not going to see them again in this movie. It's just a cavalcade of just... It's like a parade of suck. That's what it was.
Stacy Keach was like... Stacy Keach had all that makeup on. He looked crazy weird, but he was in the movie for maybe 2 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, and for for a very unimportant scene, just like talking to someone in a party sequence, and you have made up like some sort of weird supervillain.
Speaking of makeup, they totally had Josh Brolin in the wrong role. I mean, they should have had him playing who's the Mickey Rourke character?
Oh, Marv.
Because they wouldn't have had to change the makeup. The makeup was exactly the same as he was in Guardians of the Galaxy for Thanos. Wasn't he? Like, didn't he have the same exact face?
Pretty much.
I see where you're getting at with the it's everything kind of big and blocky.
Yeah, I mean, he had a big blocky face, and all they had to do was like have him keep his Guardians makeup on. It would have been fine.
That's a recast as well. That's the Josh Brolin character was the same one played by Clive Owen in the first film.
Okay.
But at least we got a call back to Yellow Skin Man.
You got to call back to Yellow Skin Man, and at least that recast it totally it makes sense because the Clive Owen character had just come off of constructive surgery, getting his face remade. That was one of the plot themes. So it's okay to have a totally different actor.
So someone needs to tell me if I'm crazy or did I see Robert Rodriguez actually in the movie. There was a scene where one of the female characters is watching a TV screen, and she's watching a movie, like a noir movie, two characters sitting in like an alleyway talking. And I swear one of those was Robert Rodriguez. But anyway, if any of you guys know, let me know. But it was interesting.
Good catch. All right, well, like I said 5 minutes ago, we do have another movie we need to discuss. Are we good with moving on, guys?
Yes.
I think we're there.
All right, so we are officially moving on from Sin City, A Dame to Kill For, and shifting gears to talk about another movie that you may never have heard of, but that's a shame because it should totally be on your radar, called Calvary. Or is it Cavalry? I always get them confused.
Calvary.
I know, I'm kidding.
Oh.
It's a joke. It's a joke. Leave the silence.
And we're not referring to a city in Canada. That's Calgary. That's
Calgary. That's a different movie altogether. Okay, silence so that you can edit in music later, Jim. Here we go. My halo is so shiny. Anyway, so
what are you talking about?
so yeah, cavalry. No, I mean Calvary. I mean Calgary. I mean anyway. So this is an interesting movie. I think I'd heard of the movie, but I'd never even seen a trailer. And so Jim's like, "Let's go see this movie about a priest," and I'm like, "What?" What? Really? So anyway, Jim, since you were the one that got me to see the movie, maybe you can give us a little background on it. And of course, we're going to have our normal non-spoilery discussion up front as to whether people should see it, and we'll give the official spoiler warning later. But Jim, what is this movie, and should people see it or avoid it?
Yeah, I'll kind of run down what the movie is, and for those of you who haven't heard about it, and then I'll give you what my impressions were of it. As Brad, as you said, it's one of those smaller, kind of under the radar movies that you hear pretty good things about, and then you decide to go see it. I heard a little bit of buzz about the movie, that it was doing very good. I checked it out on Rotten Tomatoes, and it looked like it was substantially positive. So, I figured I'd go see it, and actually, it was one of the best surprises of the year so far for me. Right up there with a movie like Under the Skin, as far as how much I liked it compared to what my expectations were going in. The movie itself is kind of a mixture of mystery drama, I guess, and morality tale, with some really dark humor sprinkled in, but very lightly. It's not a comedy like Brendan Gleeson was in a movie called was it The Guard? Was that the name of it?
Mm-hmm.
A while ago, and he's been in other movies, kind of like those British or Irish, dark comedies. But this is not really a dark comedy, although it does have some elements of humor in it, some moments, surprising moments of humor in it. The movie centers around a good priest in a small seaside Irish town. The priest is played by Brendan Gleeson, as I mentioned. And he, right at the outset, is forced to deal with kind of a sinister threat that's leveled at him by an unseen member of his congregation. And that's all I'll say. That's not really a spoiler. It's in the trailer, and it's in every synopsis, basically, that you can read. And so the main narrative of the movie is how he deals with this threat hanging over him. He's dealing with personal things in his life. He's also fulfilling his role as kind of a spiritual and emotional leader to this small congregation, Catholic congregation, of really seriously fucked up people in this town. There's some really crazy characters in this town, and guys, this movie really grabbed me, but it did so because there's so many. I found that there were so many layers to the story. There's the big mystery, and then there's the discovery of all the people in the town and their different story and how messed up they are. Struggles with faith on both sides of the equation, the priest and the parishioners, and also mixed in there, of course, because it's Catholic, is the tones of how a person of faith, and a priest in this case, is dealing with kind of the damaged Catholic Church legacy that he has to carry around in light of we've all heard about the molestation scandals that rocked the Catholic Church over the last 20, 30 years. So anyway, and each layer, as I mentioned, is very well explored, and I was just mesmerized and drawn in by this movie. If you like brilliantly written stories with great characters and acting, this is a movie to see. I will just say that I loved it. It grabbed me. I'd urge people, though, not to make the mistake of thinking that it's a, quote, religious movie and dismissing it because of that. It's not. It's not a preachy movie. It's not a movie about religion at all. It has elements of faith in it, I will say that, but more like trying to live your life and do good things instead of religion. I will just hope people go see Cavalry while it's in theaters. I think people should go see it. And if you can't catch it, I'm sure it'll get out on VOD soon. May even sneak in there for a nomination or two at the end of the year. I'm thinking especially maybe for Brendan Gleeson, who really owns this movie as the main star. But the rest of the cast does a great job too. We've got Aidan Gillen. If you guys watch Game of Thrones, and I know a lot of us do, He plays Littlefinger in Game of Thrones. What are you laughing at?
And he plays exactly the same character who talks
Almost.
really, really slimy.
Almost. Yeah, I think, like I said, I think it's he has one scene in this movie, Aidan Gillen, that kind of a speech, I guess, or a story, like had me on the edge of my seat. I was holding my breath a little bit. But yeah, go see it, find it, Calvary.
Brother Will, what do you think about this one?
Well, Brother Brad, I have to echo a lot of what Jim said. This is going to be a bit of a love fest, I think, at least coming from where I'm sitting. Calvary is one of those films that I urge anyone who has it playing at a theater near them to go out and go see it. You probably haven't heard of this film, or if you have, you may have dismissed it for the same reasons that Jim had mentioned. It's I don't want to be preached at. I don't want like a very classic religious movie that has like kind of a predictable ending. That's not what this film is at all. It centers around a priest, yes, and some of the morality that is inherent to that, but at the center of that priest is a man, and that's what this story is, the story of this man. The overarching story, the thing that kind of pulls our attention from start to finish, is this kind of like reverse whodunit, which we'll talk about in spoilers about what that means. But it's a great way of keeping you invested in like, well, what's going to happen next as you're run through this kind of gallery of unique, interesting characters. I almost feel as though like David Lynch must have been called in as a consultant to help create the supporting characters, because they were so weird and so quirky and so interesting. I felt like every single one of them, I wanted to know more about them. Some were more engaging than others, but all of them, I think, at the baseline delivered. Brendan Gleeson, as Jim mentioned, does a stellar job of carrying the entire weight of this film on his shoulders. Every scene in this movie, he's in it. He pushing along both the plot of the story and the individual plots that are wrapping up with all of these different people. It's very nuanced, it's very complex, and it ends up being very powerful as a result of that. I also have to say, just in context of this show, Brendan Gleeson's beard in this is freaking amazing. Like, it's one of those things like, okay, movie bears, if for no other reason, yes, this movie is a fantastic movie. Yes, it's one of the best I've seen. Yes, the acting is stellar. The story is stellar. There's just an inherent beauty to the countryside, which is also something that's important to think about. But even past all of that, like, Brendan Gleeson rocks an amazing beard here that's definitely worth checking out. So, yeah, you should go see this in theaters. If it doesn't play near you, obviously like video on demand or something like that. But I think that a lot of the reasons that we can bring ourselves, maybe talk ourselves out of seeing a flick, like maybe one that, I don't want to take a chance on it, haven't really heard a whole lot about it, maybe this isn't my cup of tea. If you're the type of person that likes cool stories, gut punch emotional stuff, and acting that just like makes you like, knocks you off of your seat, this is a movie you've got to go see. So I would strongly, strongly, strongly recommend Calvary.
So I have to say, this is the second time this year that Jim's like, hey, let's go see this movie. And I'm like, I've never seen a trailer for it, but sure, why not? A movie has totally made it onto my top 10 list of the year. I knew nothing about Chef really going in beyond the fact that Jon Favreau was in it. And I knew nothing about this movie really, except that Gleeson was in it. So I was really, really surprised by how good this movie was. Yeah, it's kind of a whodunit in a way, I guess, kind of. But I think the structure in terms of how they did it was really interesting. And I think more than that, I think more than solving any kind of mystery about who makes the threat or whatever, it's just the character study. We'll talk more about it when we get to spoilers, but I mean, Gleeson is the priest in a town of really like messed up people, and it's so interesting to see, him trying to have these relationships with these people and trying to like save them from themselves without being a proselytizing prick. How's that for alliteration? You know what I mean? And I just found something deeply, deeply interesting about that. I have my own personal spirituality, religion, what have you. I grew up Southern Baptist, and so I have a big aversion to proselytization. Is that a word? Don't know. Maybe.
I do too. Yeah.
Yeah, and so movies that like preach at me, I'm just like, really? And so when we sit down for this movie, like everyone there is like a blue hair. There's a woman in front of us with her Bible. She's reading her Bible, and I'm like, what have I?
Surprise for her.
I know. I'm like, what have I gotten myself into? But I was surprised by how good this was. Chris O'Dowd. I love Chris O'Dowd. Didn't know he was in this movie. And when I got to see a little bit of his hairy chest poking out of his shirt, I was like, woo, score.
You got to see his meat, too.
Yes, and what big meat he has. Holy cow.
He had quite a bit of meat. I was surprised how much.
When he's smacking it around and it's making those noises, oh, man.
Yeah.
Crazy. If that's not enough to go see this movie, world, I don't know what is, but yeah, it's good stuff. Unexpectedly so. It's on my top 10 of the year. I would say Littlefinger is Littlefinger. That's not a big appeal for me. Jim, you really liked his speech. All I could hear.
I loved it. I was riveted when he was giving that speech.
Yeah, you've used that word twice, and I know it was good for you. But for me, I don't know. I had a lot of trouble divorcing him from the Littlefinger character because if you change his clothes, he's exactly the same character. There's nothing. Well, okay, maybe that's debatable, but for me, it was pretty much the same deal. Will, where do you weigh in on that?
So I definitely see differences between this character and the Littlefinger character. I did have some. If I were to put one fault anywhere on the cast, I would have actually put it on Aidan Gillen. I still think he did a good job. I thought the character was interesting. I thought that speech was really interesting. His accent felt a little false to me compared to some of the others. It felt a little laid on thick. And, maybe it's a very regional accent, and maybe it's just my ears picking it up as funny, but at least from where I was sitting, it felt like maybe the flimsiest of the accents. But very, very minor quibble. Very, very minor. I enjoyed his performance as well.
Okay, all right. Well, maybe I'm alone. I don't know. But overall, great film. Good movie. Good film.
Yeah, I guess I did have some minor issues with the cast, but one of the most egregious problem that I had was with a very minor character, and it was early on in the film, so I'm like, as soon as the character started to say something, it was one of the little kids. It was a little kid, the altar boy kid.
We know how much you love kids anyway, Jim.
Yeah, he was one of kid actors and characters for me fall into two categories. Ones that are like trying too hard to act, and I can see right through it, and it just drives me up a wall, and ones that seem very natural. Unfortunately, he was at the beginning of the movie, and I'm like, oh, please, don't focus on this kid as a character, and luckily they really didn't, so it went okay. But I do want to read a comment here by Steve again, Steve Bubba. He says, bonus, if hot ginger daddy bears are your thing, you could do worse than staring at bearded Brendan Gleeson for 2 hours. Yeah, he's definitely the prototype for a hot ginger daddy bear. Unfortunately, he spends the whole movie in his, I don't know what it's called.
Is that what it's called? A cassock? Cassock,
I guess, whatever. Yeah, so you don't really get to see much of a form or his body, but still fun to look at, and he did a wonderful job in the movie. This movie reminded me a little bit of a Western. Did you guys get that thing, like the whole setup? Well, maybe we should talk about this in spoilers.
I know where you're going with that, but spoilers, yeah.
Well, what do you say to moving on to spoilers? Are we okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Do it. I think we got a lot more to talk about.
Here we go. Moving on into spoilers. Here's your abbreviated spoiler tag. Listen at your own peril. Spoilers are fair game. Okay, go ahead. I said that a little fast. Feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, go for it, Jim. This
the whole Western thing, right? It's basically set up as kind of a showdown at high noon.
Yeah.
You know, the guy basically challenges him to come meet his fate at a certain date, at a certain place, and a certain time, and that's kind of the Western feel that you got from it. And you know, but instead of the bad guy challenging the sheriff, he's challenging a priest, which is unusual. Pretty shocking first line in this movie. In the confessional booth.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He says, I forget what the line is, but it's I thought I had it here somewhere, but maybe not. Anyway, he says, what did he say? I tasted semen for the first time when I was 7 years old.
Yeah, and church lady in front of us is like,
I know. Yeah.
What did I get myself into?
But he lays out a pretty brutal picture of abuse that happened to him at the hands of another priest, as he was growing up. I went back and listened to the trailer, and I don't think that's O'Dowd's voice.
Really?
Brad, you said you knew who it was at one point.
No, not at the beginning. Not at the beginning. The voice sounded slightly familiar, but it wasn't that. The first inkling I had is when we were in the meat shop, and he's like punching his meat. You know what I mean?
Well, he was chopping it, right?
Chopping it, whatever. But no, it wasn't until that scene in the bar, 2/3 of the way through the movie, when he's almost like taunting Father James, that I was like, oh, it's him.
But weren't they all at that point? Weren't they? Wasn't it getting to?
Yeah.
They were, but it was something about the way it seemed more personal for him. Like, I don't really know how to articulate it very well. I sound dumb trying to say it, or like, oh, yep, called it, like that annoying guy who has to like pretend he knew what was going to happen all along. But Chris O'Dowd is like one of those actors who, I don't know, like you don't. He has good range, and I think he does an effective job. And I don't know. I thought maybe they were saving him for more than just, the weird dude with the meat. And just the way that he was taunting Father James or whatever just kind of stuck out at me. But they did a really good job of sort of misdirecting you. Like, at times you think it's Littlefinger. At times you think maybe it's the bartender and his baseball bat.
Or the rich guy.
Bludgeon. Or the weird, eccentric rich guy. I mean, they did a great job of keeping you bouncing around. But I don't know. I just had a feeling, and it ended up being true.
There were these two. You mentioned the blue hairs, Brad. It was weird. I saw this at a press and promotional screening, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna get like the same crew I normally see at these. But I ended up having a lot of I guess blue hair members of the press there sitting with me. It was a very different crowd, and right behind me, there were two people that were playing the. I called it game the entire movie. But the movie did such a good job of misdirecting things that I swear every time someone walked up on stage or up on screen, I would hear them behind me go, oh, I bet it's him. I bet you that's the guy. Yeah, see, did you hear that thing? And all through the movie, and it of course it's annoying when people talk in the movie, but for me it was funny and helped kind of echo just how well this film did of making everyone that appeared on screen compelling enough that you can at least buy the there's some plausibility that this person could be the one. And what's so great about this movie is that it's maybe a mystery to us as an audience, but it's not a mystery to the characters that are involved. From the time that it happens, Brendan Gleeson's character knows who it is.
Yeah.
And
he doesn't let on who it is, but he knows.
He doesn't let on to the audience or to anyone that he talks to about it. But everyone who's involved in this knows, except for maybe the one priest that asks him about it and he never tells. And so all through the film, whenever he has a very meaningful conversation with someone, you're thinking, like, is he trying to, like, give this guy some closure? The guy that's maybe eventually going to kill him, give him some sort of closure for the things going on in his life? And that makes the character that much more compelling and that much stronger, because he creates this, like, he shares this, like, morality, this strength, this, like, this beacon in the dark to all of these troubled souls on the eve of his death, and including the person that he knows has it out for him. Bravo.
Yeah, yeah. I just like you said, Will. The movie sets up this kind of not a whodunit, but who's gonna do it mystery, and a lot of people, moviegoers are going to be focused on that. But there's so much more going on in this movie. Especially his struggle. There's a scene that calls out the church abuses pretty well, where he's walking and he ends up, there's this little girl, and he ends up meeting her and having a very innocent conversation, and the dad pulls up in the car and it's like, what are you doing? What did he do to you? Blah, blah, blah. And that was really uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah.
Because you knew that he's a good guy, and you didn't think that had any way that it was going to go there, into the, molestation area, but yet that's kind of the presumption of guilt that, hangs over the church and of him in the movie. And really the movie wants you to take a look at this guy, this priest, as a man and as a person who brings, emotional truth and spiritual truth to people, and not a church, not a big organization, a huge, rich organization. It's really about the man. Do you guys think that this movie is positive or negative on either Catholicism or religion and faith? Do you think this movie is comes down on the pro side of being religious and faithful, or is it very skeptical?
I think it does both, because we have a character who is this priest, who I think that we can logically assume, or we can say is a strong, moral, positive character who has these values, has these tenets, and even if things are kind of falling to pieces around him, he still holds on to these, and not just as like a safety net or like a life preserver, but uses them as kind of his way of giving light back to the world. So there's some positive, but you also have this other priest who is his counterbalance, who's a guy who gets into it for all of the wrong reasons and even leaves the priesthood after a stern talking to from Brendan Gleeson's character. So I don't know that I would say that it's implicitly positive or negative. I think that it's definitely I think that it's taking the stance, at least, that there's some positive, that there's some negative, and that I think that this film is more about the man that's under the cassock than about the church itself.
For me, I felt it very much took this standpoint of just being true to who you are, no matter where life takes you. I think as he's going through, I mean, he thinks he knows who it is, and you're right, he's having all these conversations with people. Is he trying to get closure with people? Is he trying to help them one last time? We don't know. How easy would it have been to, just leave town and get out of Dodge right away? At one point in the movie, he attempts to do that after his dog is killed and his daughter goes away. But he turns around. He remains true to himself, his faith, the work that he's trying to do, and ultimately it gets him killed. But I mean, I think the movie makes a point without making the point that it may be a hard road to hoe or whatever. But if you remain true to who you are, then even if you die, you die free in a way. And I thought that was poignant.
Yeah, Brad, I think you hit on something. You and I joke about the high road and maintaining the high road, and that's kind of the overarching theme that I got out of this movie. Father James was a guy who, religious or not, he tried to stay on the high road and do the right thing all the time in every situation. And he was in some rough spots. He had guys threatening to kill him. He had people killing his dog. He broke down a couple of times. I mean, there was a point in the movie he pulled a gun on people. But you could tell that struggle was very apparent the whole time. And I just love the way that it kind of glorified, in a way, him staying on the high road, as much as was possible. What did you guys think of this movie? Really had two endings. It had the ending on the beach, and it had the ending in the prison. At the very end. What did you guys think of both? Let's talk about the beach scene first. First of all, I want to say this movie was gorgeously photographed and shot. There were some amazing scenes. That scene on the beach at the end, I thought was fantastic with the Chris O'Dowd character walking from very far away. You really the shot was so wide, and you could see a character walking up the beach, but you weren't sure who it was. And they kind of held the suspense until he kind of got right there, and then you figured out who it was. That was amazing. There were some great sweeping landscape shots of the Irish countryside that were wonderful as well. But what did you think of that last scene, the beach scene in particular? And did you think they were going to go there?
Yeah. So first of all, to echo your point about the landscapes and the photography, it's beautiful. Almost all of the shots, especially anything that was outdoors, was beautiful to look at. You could take a picture of it, hang it on my wall. And that goes for this final scene on the beach too. Everything looked very sharp, looked very interesting, made for for really what's just two guys on a beach with an explosive end. They were able to really make the most of that sequence, just from a visual standpoint. But thematically, I thought it worked really, really well. I felt like all throughout that scene, you could very easily have seen a bunch of outs. Like, maybe the kid comes back with someone. Maybe Brendan Gleeson's able to talk Chris O'Dowd off the ledge. Maybe, just maybe, but it doesn't pan out, and he ends up dying. In a very, very bloody manner. In fact, the blue hairs, like when the actual shot comes and they don't pull away from it. They were gasping and made very uncomfortable, and I appreciated that. This film did not turn away from it. I mean, you think about the actual name of this movie, Calvary, which actually is the
place where the
references Mount Calvary, where the crucifixion happened. And here you have a guy who I wouldn't necessarily say that the Brendan Gleeson character is dying for the sins of the people in his village, but this is a man who has walked through all of these sins, has faced temptation, has faced his own mortality, and ends up, like you said, Jim, taking the higher road. And as a result, he dies for it, but it's a noble death. So we'll talk about the other ending here in a second, but this ending here, I thought, as everything wrapped up on the beach, I thought was really, really powerful.
Yeah. Did the humor throw you off at all? There's a point after where Chris O'Dowd walks up that the dog comes up, and he says, "I didn't do that. Really, I didn't." It was kind of a dark comedy moment. Like, no, I really didn't do that.
I don't think Chris O'Dowd killed the dog.
No.
Right. But just the way that
who do you think
Father James thought he did, and he says, "No, I didn't kill him, but I'm going to kill you."
Who do you think did it?
No idea.
Yeah,
it's definitely left open-ended. I have no idea. Could have been any of the others.
I think it was Littlefinger.
I don't know. It could have been the bar guy.
It could have been a lot of people. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like this, despite his best of intentions, one of the things that Brendan Gleeson does during these sequences is he's at least from these other people's perspective, is he's in everyone's business, and that makes people very uncomfortable. And he's doing it for the right reasons, and I think that he does provide some good guidance to the people that accept his what he says, especially like the woman who's dealing with the loss of her husband who died kind of tragically. But I think a lot of people were uncomfortable with Brendan Gleeson's character saying, you know, hey, here's the things that you need to do, here's what you need to change. And a lot of them at this montage sequence that happens there at the end of the film, you can see are kind of back to their old ways, like they maybe didn't learn from him as much as they could have or should have.
Right, right. Go ahead, Brad.
I was just going to say real quick, the only reason I think it's Littlefinger is, you know, at one point, you know, he has to pull the plug on the woman's husband that was in the car accident, and he passes. And then he's having a conversation with the father, and he's like, well, I have to go inside now, and I have to kill somebody. And then it comes up later on, he asks about the dog or whatever, and if it's still suffering, and so it was just my feeling that maybe he put the dog out of its misery because he's used to doing that. And maybe in a way he's, in his weird, fucked up way, he's trying to like help Father James, but doesn't really know obviously what else is going on, and it's not really helping at all. But anyway, just a theory. Could be wrong. I'm not the writer or director, so who knows?
Yeah, it's hard to say if there's another, you know, scene in maybe there's a deleted scene in the movie where we do learn that. I don't know, but the very ending scene in the prison was kind of surprising to me. Like what the hell is happening here? At first you didn't know what was going on, and then you see the daughter of Father James, because he was. Some of you may think that's weird, but those of you who've seen the movie know he came to the priesthood late, and he was married and had a kid before he came to the priesthood. So the daughter was from his marriage. But, you know, she's at the prison, obviously, to talk to the Chris O'Dowd character, who's in there for murder. And not a word is spoken between them. It's just a kind of a look. And she gives him a look, and she's got this... It's hard to explain, but she has this look on her face of that she's forgiven him for what he did. Like she seems to be totally. I saw it as a look of forgiveness, and then his look in return was even more astounding. It was like, I can't believe you're forgiving me. And it's kind of like a look of that he's recognizing redemption in a way.
I saw it slightly different, but I think we're on the same. We're in a similar boat. I think just kind of a slightly different interpretation. Earlier in the film, there was the sequence where her father, Brendan Gleeson, had told her that the most important takeaway is forgiveness. Like, that's the one thing I want you to take away, the one thing that I want you to do. And so when she shows up at the prison, I didn't get the vibe that she had forgiven him. I got the vibe that she wanted to forgive him because that's what her father had told her to do, and that she was making up her mind kind of right there on the spot whether she was going to be able to go through with it. And the movie ends before we're able to see whether it becomes a yes or whether she can't. And what I liked about that thematically, at least for me, like the gut punch, like the thing that made me really think about things on the drive home, was we're able to sit through this movie, and because we're following Brendan Gleeson's character around, we're able to see him make these mostly moral decisions, and even the ones that he makes that are stumbles, he recognizes it and tries to self-correct. It's easy for us to sit back and watch another character make these types of decisions, but when we're actually the one that has to be the one doing the forgiving over something that personally affects us, it's a lot harder. And that's what this character, the daughter, is having to do right there. Again, it's easy for her to say, "Yes, Dad, I'll do forgiveness. I've got it." And it's another thing for her to actually do it. So I think the movie is kind of challenging us there. Like, could you do this? Is this something that you could do?
Indeed. All right. Well, I think that about draws us to a close on this discussion. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, great movie. Kind of ends on a Chris O'Downer. Kind of ends on a Chris O'Downer, but you know.
Wah,
wah. Who knows? Maybe we'll be talking about Calvary, at the end of the year. Who knows?
Maybe, or maybe Gleason will return as Father James. And the Avengers 3: Age of Calvary.
Age of Catholicism.
Calvary, a priest to kill for.
Sin Calvary. Anyway, all right. So let's move on to some pluggity plugs. Jim, what you got this week?
I don't have anything other than our local movie bear group. It's the Botop Movie Bears, which stands for Bears of the Old Pueblo, BOTOP, Movie Bears. You can find us on Facebook at that name, Botop Movie Bears.
Awesome. Well, what do you got?
So mine's a little off the reservation, but it ties in with one of the themes of this show, which is strong narratives, or our desire for strong narratives. The final episode of Season 2 of the Walking Dead video game came out this week by Telltale. And I've long thought that the Telltale Walking Dead games tell the story of Walking Dead that I wish, personally for me, I know some people enjoy the show, but that I don't. That it tells the story that I wish the show was telling. Last episode came out this week. We had a chance to kind of clear up this episode, this whole season. All the characters have been doing things. We'll get to see how they, what their fates are, and it is really good. Lots of different endings available. So I know it's a video game and not a movie, but the narrative is what this game is all about. If you haven't played it yet, the Telltale Walking Dead games. If you love The Walking Dead, you'll love this game. If you hate The Walking Dead, I say try this. This is probably what you want instead. So, Telltale's Walking Dead, check it out.
Awesome. Yeah, I love the Telltale Walking Dead games. I'm only like partway through the second installment of this season, and I've been deliberately pacing myself because I know once I'm done and destroyed a second time, it's going to be like a year and a half before Season 3 comes out. So I'm glad to hear that it's awesome sauce, but I'm going to take all year to get there, maybe. We'll see. Anyway, let's see. Plugs for me. So, unfortunately, you missed it on Friday. But Stargate Atlantis, the complete series on Blu-ray, was the Amazon Gold deal of the day, and it was on sale for $44.99. Regular price was like $249.99, so that's pretty awesome. But if you are at all interested in this series, Amazon still has the Blu-ray set available for $68.95. So if you love this series and don't want to pay $200, now is your chance to save 68%.
And you've been rewatching that.
I have, and I've been rewatching it on fucking Amazon Prime instant motherfucking video bullshit. You know what? I am changing to the horns. No more Halo. I'm sorry. I've got some hate, some rage hate going on right now. You know what? I have an Xbox. I have an Apple TV. I have a phone. I have a smart TV. It seems kind of crazy to me that I have to go buy something in HD on the media server through a website to then be able to watch it on my phone to then stream it to my Apple TV, or I have to buy it on a website on a computer to then go onto my Xbox and be able to pull it up and watch it. That seems crazy to me. Why in the world, Amazon Prime, can you not buy something to watch through the Xbox interface? Or I don't know. Anyway, it's crazy. But yes, I've been rewatching Stargate Atlantis. There we go. Video on demand. And the quality fucking sucks. So bought it on Blu-ray for $40. How awesome was that deal of the day? Anyway, so yeah, if you like it, save some money, go buy it now. Awesome series. All right, think that about wraps it up for us this week, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Not sure what we're doing for next week yet. We got to talk about that. We got to make some plans. There's some sort of Parisian horror movie coming out, apparently. But we'll figure it out. Have a good one, everyone. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.